Alright guys, in our previous lesson we talked about navigation in Cinema 4D. We talked a lot about the transform tools, we talked about the objects, the layer manager. So in this lesson we're going to be creating a 3D text. So I'm really excited and I just wanted to jump right into the fun thing in Cinema 4D. Now before I proceed, I would like to quickly reiterate on the thing we did in the last lesson. Now we created a cube by just left clicking on this and it gets created in the center of the origin. We left click on this down and we created a capsule. Now I drag this capsule up, and the way I did that is to move my cursor right on top of this, making sure the capsule is selected, and then when I move this cursor to the y-axis, because this is the y-axis, this is the z-axis, and this is the x, is already written here, so in case you forget that, so it's written right here. So I just move my cursor on top of this and it changes to white, which means it's now active, and I left click on it and I drag up. So that was how I did that. And the next thing I did was to parent this cube to the capsule, and the way you do that is to left click on this cube and drag it directly on top of this capsule. Now before you release it, Cinema 4D is pointing an arrow downwards saying this cube will now be a child of this capsule. And so what happens when we move this? The cube moves along with it. Alright, so basically that was what we did, and we also talked about the navigation tools and all of that. You can always go back to watch in case you forget any. Now I'm going to quickly delete this and we are going straight into the fun stuff. So we are creating a 3D text in Cinema 4D. With this you'll be able to create a title design. With this you'll be able to create title design and so much amazing things. So with this you're going to be able to create title design and so much more. Alright, so we start by going to Demograph right here. Now Demograph is a very powerful tool in Cinema 4D. Currently for this particular lesson we just want to deal with demo text right here, but there's a lesson that speaks in depth about the Demograph tool. It's a very powerful tool. Alright, so I'm going to left click on this and I'm going to left click on the mode text, and now we have our text created and it's already looking really nice. So I'm going to change a couple of things. Now when I click on this text I'm going to go to my attributes right here and I'm going to delete this and I'm going to type 3D and make it smaller design. Alright, so it's looking good, and the next thing I want to do is to change my font. So just gonna look for a really nice font. Let's do impact. I believe everybody has impact. If not, you can just download. I think it's free on the internet or something. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is to start touching on these features in the attributes manager. So the first thing is the depth, and basically it does what it says. Depth gives more depth to your object. Before we proceed, I would like to change this display mode. Right, so for you to change this display mode in Cinema 4D, you need to just go to the display and then you get all this display mode right here. Now I would like to change this to the garage shading lines, and so I get this really nice line going around it so we can see what's going on. And the next thing I want to do is to have a really nice bevel edge around this area here in the 3D text. Right, so for me to do that I'll just go to my caps, and currently I'm using Cinema 4D R21. So if you're using any other previous version, basically you can still do the same thing, but things are just a little bit different there. Alright, so I'm going to change this from I'm going to increase the size of this round to about say 2.5, and already you can see we have this really nice rounded edges going on right there. Now there's an amazing thing that was built into Cinema 4D R21. I don't think it's in R20. I think it started in R21. I'm not so sure, but If you go to this load presets here, you can see some really nice presets. So you can just select on any one of them and it will be applied to your text. So let's say I want to just click on this. Let me go for a really drastic one. Okay, let me click this one, 4 steps, and let me zoom in so you can see what's happening. Good. So we now have this 4 steps going on, right? So you can as well create this manually, and you can see what's really happening here. Currently this is set to curve, and the size is set to 5, right? So if I mess with this, you can see what's going on right there. I'm going to leave this back to 5, and basically the curve was messed with, and that's why you have that really nice look there. But Cinema 4D has made it really easy, so you can only just load a preset, and the presets, it's applied, right? So I'm going to just leave it to this particular preset. Yeah, I think this works just fine. And yeah, so that's it. Now the next thing I want to do is to create some boxes around this 3D design text, right? So before that, I'm going to first of all create a plane which is going to serve as the ground. For me to do that, I just left click and you select the plane right here. So I'm clicking plane, and the plane has been created in our scene. Alright, so I'm going to click on my text and I'm going to move it all the way down here. Now currently the text access is set to this area here, and if I go back to my object, I can see the reason why that is happening. That's because the align here is set to left. Now if I change this to middle, see what happens. So it pops into the middle, which I think is fine, and we're going to move this back here. So what we want to do is to go back to our plane. We want to increase our plane to about, say, 2000 by 2000. Yep, and we're going to move our 3D text right up. Now, once start populating our scene, we're just going to click on this to create a cube, and we're going to make sure the cube is sitting directly on top of this grid. Now, for us to do that, we're going to go to the coordinates, and we have to move it in the y-axis. Now, there's an easier way to do this. If you go back to your object, if you notice the y-axis is set to 200 centimeter. So basically the whole of this guy, that is the height, is set to 200 centimeter. So all you need to do is just go to your coordinates and then half that. So if you make this 100, it's going to sit directly on the grid. Alright, so I'm going to move this backward, and I'm going to go back to the object. I'm going to make this really tall on the y-axis. I'm going to make it like 700, and so when you have that, that'll be 350. So if I come back here, click on 350, that should pop right back on the grid. So I'm going to just create some random cubes, and I'm going to hold down control. Now I'm going to hold down control and then left click on the x-axis to create a copy, right? So the way I did that was to click on the object, hold down control, and then move your cursor to that axis you're trying to make a copy to, left click on hold, and then you drag. So that's how you create this copy. Alright, so for this copy, I'm going to make this a different size. So basically I can just do this directly from the viewport. I don't have to go back all the way to start messing with the values right here. I can always do it directly here. So I'm just going to quickly do that. Move things around, drop this around here. I'm going to move another one to the front, and then make it so I want to make it look like this 3D text is sitting directly on top of this. Alright, so I'm going to move this. And yeah, so I'm going to create more copies. Drop this around the back. This down about here. Yep. And then I'm going to create a cylinder, right? So I'm just filling it with just simple primitives. Yep. I'm also going to left click on this, and this time around I want to select the tube, and I'm going to move the tube up. I'm going to come about here, and then I'm going to change the orientation in the attribute area of the cube. Now the more I create this different objects, you can see they are being populated on the object manager right here. But before I go if I continue to create this object, I want to start renaming things. So I want to click on this, name this maybe I think they're just fine with cube 1, cube 2. I think that's just fine, but you can always change this. It's all depend on your preference. One more thing I'm going to do is to click on this object. I'm going to click on the fillet, and it's going to give me this really nice round edges. Now the reason why you want to do this is when you light your scene, these edges catch some really nice specular reflection, so it makes it look really nice. You can decide to give it some more subdivisions, fillet subdivisions, and you can decide to reduce the radius as well. You can leave this to 2, you can leave this to 5. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve. For this purpose, I'm going to leave it to 2, and I'm going to do the same thing to the others. Now I can only select multiple objects, so I click on this first one, hold down shift, click on the second one, hold down shift, click on the one at the back, and I can just turn this on for all 3 of them, so I don't have to do them individually. So it makes our work really fast. So I'm going to click on the fillet, and now it gets applied to all of them. I'm going to turn this fillet radius to about 2, and I think that's fine. Yep. Awesome. So now the next thing is to, let me continue with this tube. I'm going to change the orientation to positive Z, and I'm going to increase the outer radius a bit. I'm going to increase the inner radius as well, so we have this really nice ring going on, and we're going to put this at the back right here. And we're going to make sure this is sitting directly on the grid. I think it's fine this way. I'm going to increase the rotational segments so it's super smooth. Move this up a bit, and I'm going to zoom in a bit, and I'm going to have this rounded edges because I don't like the way this edge is so sharp. I'm going to add this rounded edge so it catches some really nice highlights, and you do that by just clicking fillet. I'm sure you guys guessed that already. I'm going to raise the radius to about 2, segments to about 6, fine, and I'm going to increase the rotational segment some more so I get some really nice smooth edge going on. Turn it up. Yep, I think this looks just nice. Alright, so we have been able to create our 3D title design. Now the next thing to do will be to create our lights and do a quick render in this. Now for this course we will be rendering with Octane Render, and as we go further in this course there are separate lessons that talks about Octane Render in depth, right? So we'll focus on how to use Octane Render, how to render our passes, how to render good clean photorealistic images, how to render images for product animations like you see online on Instagram, Facebook, all across social media. So we're going to touch on all of that. Right now I'm just going to quickly load up my Octane Render. Now in the other lesson where we talk about Octane Render, I'm going to show you how to install Octane Render. Currently I'm running Octane Render 4.0. I'm on a paid subscription, and Octane Render is really affordable, so you don't have to buy the entire 1-year plan. You can always go for the subscription model, which is about I think $16 if you're paying annually, $16 per month, and if you're paying monthly it's $19 thereabout. Yeah, $19 to rent Octane for 1 month. So usually I rent my Octane based on when I have projects. When I'm not using it I don't rent, which I think is really good. So for this course I'm just going to, for this particular lesson, I'm just going to quickly load up my Octane Render, right? So I click on my Octane Render and I click on the live viewer window, right? So when I click on the live viewer window, alright, so I click on my, alright, so I'm going to quickly create my light. And I'm going to open up my live viewer first. Okay, so I'm going to open up my Octane live viewer window, and I'm going to just going to quickly hit render. So right now, without anything in my scene, there's no lights. This is how Octane looks right out of the box. So I have my object and my 3D design text here. So one thing I want to do is to quickly load up a saved layout that I have, which is Octane user. If I click this, it docks itself down to this area. Now I'm going to show you how I created that. I'm going to change this back to my standard view, and when I load up my Octane live viewer, I can simply just click on this. I'm going to load up my Octane viewer again, and I can click this and then try and dock this around here. So I'm going to dock this here. Alright, so I'm going to left click on this, and I can move it to this party, and I dock this. Okay, so I'm going to open up my Octane live viewer window, and I want to just find a space to dock it around here. So the way I do that is I just click this and just drop it down here. Yeah, so now I've docked Octane, the live viewer right here. So Octane is a GPU based render, so basically it renders using your GPU, which makes it incredibly fast if you have a very great graphics card. Currently I'm using an RTX 2080 Ti, which is amazing. So I'm just going to hit this button here, and Octane renders out of the box. Now there's no light, there's nothing going on in the scene. I just have my basic object. Now I'm going to click on this little icon here, which takes me to the Octane render settings, and I'm going to just quickly change this to path tracing. Now we're going to touch more on this later on in the course. I'm going to change my samples to 600. I'm going to change it to 6, change the specular depth to 6. Usually I turn the specular depth all the way to 12 if I'm doing anything that's to do with reflective or transparency like glass. Now all of these settings, all of this Octane is going to be explained further in the course, so you have no cause for them. Everything is explained completely so you can follow easily. Alright, so next thing I want to do is I want to change my GI clamp to 1, and yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I want to do. So now if I hit render again, currently I'm in my path tracing, and you see it's looking a whole lot nicer than what we had before. So the next thing I want to do is to create my camera. Alright, so I'm going to go to my object, I'm going to click on my Octane camera. So I'm going to click on this little icon here, so that means the camera is active. If I click this, it means the camera is not active, so I'm not looking directly in my camera view. But if I click this, it means the camera is active, right? So the next thing I want to do is to just create a light in the scene, and the way I do that is to come to my object. I'm going to go to my light. I'm going to click on my Octane area light. So the next thing is to create my light, and the way I do that is to go to my object, click on light. I'm going to load my Octane area light, and when I click on this, see what happens. I have my light written in the scene. Now there's one thing I want to quickly touch before I continue. I want to go to my settings. I'm going to click on the settings. I'm going to click on environment. Now currently there's a default white environment in this scene, right? That comes when you open Octane, default environment white, and we don't want that. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to change this to black by just dragging this, and now I've changed this to black, right? So now there's no light except for this in the scene. I'm going to quickly I'm going to click on this camera. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to my I'm going to add a tag that enables it. Alright, so I'm going to right click on this Octane camera. I'm going to go to my rigging tags, and I want to turn on the protection. Basically the protection means we are unable to move this camera view, so we don't make the mistake of just moving around. So everything is stuck on this camera view. So I'm going to click down, or I'm going to click on this button here. It brings up this for view. I'm going to go to any of this view, click on it, and the middle mouse button to maximize it. I'm going to change the camera to perspective, and I'm going to change the display to garage shading lines. Alright, awesome. So right now I'm going to click on my camera, and the next thing will be to position the camera in the scene. Alright, so I'm going to click on my light, and the next thing will be to position my light in the scene properly. So I'm going to come around here. I'm going to move it up first a bit, and I'm going to rotate this way, right? So I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to go to my light tag right here, and I'm going to quickly touch on this light settings. Now I'm going to reduce the power. Basically the power is intensity, so as I reduce the power, you can see what's happening. It's the intensity is dropping, and the next thing is the temperature, right? I'm going to leave the temperature to default. So basically just affect the temperature of the light if you want to make it warm or you want to make it cool, right? So I'm going to right click, go to reset to default. So I'm going to reset it back to the default. Now the next one is the texture. So basically if you load a texture into this light will be projected using that texture, right? And the next one is the distribution. If you load a texture into this distribution, so the next one is the distribution. If you load a texture into this, the light will be distributed according to the pixels of that texture, right? So the next one is the surface brightness. Basically it just says what basically the surface. So the next one is the surface brightness. So the next one is surface brightness. Usually I just leave this to default, and the next one is keep instance power. I don't check this on. So the next one is the surface brightness, and double-sided basically just means that both the front part and the back part of the light are illuminated, which is not needed. I'm going to go to the visibility, and basically I can turn off camera visibility, so that means this is not visible to the camera. And if I turn off shadow visibility, it also means that this light the light shadow won't be visible. And also we have the general visibility, so this is completely occluded from our scene, so you don't see the light at all, right? So one more thing I just want to do is I'm just going to create more lights. I'm going to go to my object, lights, create additional light. I'm going to drag this right here. I'm going to rotate this, so I'm holding down shift to snap it to 90 degrees. So when you hold down shift and you rotate, it snaps it to specific values. It gives it increment of about 5. So I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to change this. First of all, I'm going to turn off the camera visibility, shadow visibility. I'm going to turn him down. I'm going to go to my light settings and just drop this down a whole lot, and I'm going to move it back. So I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger, move it to the side, and yep. So one more thing I want to do is to create another duplicate of this light. So I'm just going to hold down control, left click on this gizmo here on the z-axis, and I'm just going to move it to the side, and I'm going to rotate it so it faces our object in the scene. I'm rotating it holding down shift, so I'm going to rotate 180 degrees, and I'm going to move it backward. Yep, so basically we have something like a 3-point light system, and I'm going to rotate this into shape as well. Alright. So the final thing we're going to do is to create materials for this entire scene, right? So we're going to start from the floor itself, and to create materials using Octane, you simply go to the materials and you select the Octane glossy material. Now basically we have different kind of material in Octane. We have the diffuse material, which basically is usually used for a matte finish. We have the glossy material for glossy surfaces. We have the specular material for glass. We have the Octane metallic material to create octane metals, and we have the universal material to create any of these materials up here. We also have the Octane Mix, which allows you to mix more than one material together. Now for this course, we'll be using both the Octane Diffuse. For this lesson, we'll be using both the Octane Diffuse and the Octane Glossy material. So I'm going to click on the Octane Glossy material and get drop into my scene, and I'm just going to apply that directly to the plane. Now there are multiple ways to do that. I can always click on this and drag this directly onto the plane, and now you see we have a really nice reflective surface going on right here, right? And if you click on this, you can open up this Octane material here, right here. So this is more or less like the material editor, and you can start editing all these materials. Now the first thing we're going to touch on is the diffuse, which basically is the color of the material. Currently it's set to white, and if I change this to say about red, so what happens, it changes the color to red, right? But I'm going to leave this back to white. Red is really not looking bad, but well, I'm just going to change this to white because I can. And the next thing will be to come to the roughness. Now the specular reflections, if you turn the specular down, see what happens. So you lose all those really nice specular reflections. So you can see the specular that was that the light was being affected by, it's no longer there. So the light here was reflecting here because the specular was done right up here, right? But now it's gone. So basically when you reduce the specular, we are reducing the reflectivity of the material, right? So if I turn this back up and I go to the next option, which is the roughness. Now roughness has to do with the blurriness of this specular reflections. So if you turn up the roughness, you are blurring these reflections, right? And yeah, so let's just turn this to 0.1 and see what happens. So we blurred out these reflections right here. So this is looking really nice, right? So for now, basically this is what we are touching on, this Octane materials. As we go further in the course, I explain Octane really deeply, and we touch on all these materials. We go further into Octane and talk about the Octane node editor, which is a very powerful part in Octane materials. And the next thing will be to apply multiple materials to the rest of these objects. Alright, so I'm going to leave you to do that in your quiz. Alright, so that will be the test. You create multiple materials on all these objects, right? And of course you create your own object and you drop your multiple materials on them. Alright, so I'll see you in the next class.